where he was going. Okay, I can't help but to think, and I want to emphasize this because we're going to have examples not just of Abraham, we're going to have examples of Isaac, and you know who else makes this list? There's a guy named he who grabs the heel, the cheater. Jacob makes this list. In fact, it's going to get worse. You know, here I'm making these evaluations. You know who else makes this list? Lot makes this list.
Lot. Yeah.
Man, Samson makes this list. I'm like, whoa! Now there's some great examples of some really godly people, but I want you to go back to these first few examples, right? Chris.
Never mind. I'll ask you later.
Okay. Think of these first few examples here. Abraham, right? Great man of faith. What did Abraham do to his wife when he went to?
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
He lied.
Well, she's my sister. Go ahead.
Go ahead, take her.
Yeah. In fact, most of the stories, when you're reading through the book of Genesis, I know, and the Hebrew author points this out, boy, these guys had some great moments where God said it, I'm going to do it. Yeah, they did. But boy, these guys blew it too. Man, they made some...
Maybe they did it to emphasize the human, just like us now. You know, we do some things right and we do some things wrong.
Do some major things wrong. Yeah. In fact, his biggest example that he's going to have here in this list is a guy named Moses. Wow, what a man of great faith. He also had a record. Remember what crime he committed?
Murder.
That's a pretty big crime.
Yeah.
Okay, I keep getting sidetracked. These first few examples from the book of Genesis, right? When you're going through the book of Genesis, there's a lot of great lessons to learn. But if you read the book of Genesis as though it's a bedtime story, and here's the moral of the story, be like Abraham. Here's the moral of the story, be like Isaac. Here's the moral of the story, be like, I don't want to be like Jacob. You know, starts to fall apart when you start to point to these people. And then you go back and you look at Abraham and you say, well, don't always be like Abraham. You be like Abraham here, but not here.
But the other way to look at it is, and I like the way he said it, is that, hey, he's not that great. If he can do it, I can do it. I can have faith as well.
Man, I like that, guys. That's really good. That's really good. You guys are way ahead of me. The point I was going to try to make, though, if you read the book of Genesis and you try to read it as a moral guideline, you're just going to fall flat on your face. You're going to run into story after story, especially like Judah and Tamar. Man, who do you want to follow in that story? You know, there's just so many. And you got to come to the realization the only hero in the book of Genesis is God. In story after story after story, the hero is God. And if you get that, the point he's making by all these examples is not, man, wasn't Abraham great? Man, wasn't Moses great? Man, wasn't I? No! Because they all had clay feet. Man, wasn't God great in dealing with Abraham? If we could do the same sort of thing, and this is where what you guys said, yeah, you know what? We can have those moments like Abraham did too, because we're flawed, but you know what? We can have faith. Because it's not about us, it's about God. If Jacob can make this list, if Lot can make this list, you know what? You too can make this list. Because the point is faith in that bright light, in God, in the one who knows. That's the point of what we're talking about here. Let's go a little bit further with Abraham. He says he went without knowing where he was going, verse 9. And when he reached the land that God had promised him, he lived there by faith. For he was like a foreigner living in tents. And the point of application here is, here's the guy who owns the land, technically. God says it's all yours. Never built a house, never had a mansion, lived in tents. So did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city. Man, I love this. He was confidently looking forward to a city with, the Greek literally says, the foundations, eternal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not just eternal foundations, but the foundations, eternal ones. A city designed and built by God. Push pause. What did he just say? He said this whole time, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they're living. What really kept them going and what really pleased God, i.e. faith, here it is. They kept looking beyond all this stuff and realizing there's more beyond. Wow, he's going to keep coming back to that. Seeing the unseen, seeing beyond this life. Keep your eyes fixed on heaven. Because we know what kind of God we've got. We know what's waiting for us. Then we can face what's ever in between, right? So he says he did that. He's going to, in chapter 12, verse 22, he's going to talk about God building this city in heaven for us. Down here in verse 10, he's going to come back to it again. God has built a place for us. It's already built, by the way. Verse 11, it was by faith that even Sarah, now again, I like my translation here because even Sarah. Okay, now why would he say that when he's talking about Sarah? Because this is a chapter on faith. What does faith mean? Trusting belief. And when God said, you're going to have a kid, everybody trusted God. What did Sarah do?
Laughed.
Ha! Yeah, that's trusting belief. Isn't it? Well, even Sarah, you know what I take that to mean? Even people who blow it on the subject of faith, you can still pick yourself up. And you can still start trusting in the one you ought to trust in. Because even Sarah here was able to have a child. Though she was barren and was too old, she believed that God would keep his promise. Can I add editorially? Eventually, she believed that God would keep his promise, right? And so a whole nation came from this one. The emphasis here is that this great promise started as something so little. In this case, it started as a baby. From this one man who was as good as dead. It's not talking about his physical condition. It just means he was long past the age where he should expect to be able to have children. Right? In fact, it uses the Greek word sperma here. It's talking about being able to produce children in this. This is one of the reasons I like having a men's group. It's easier to talk about some of these things with some of these words here. Anyway, he says, as good as dead, a nation with so many people that like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Stars of the sky, the sand of the seashore were proverbial statements. So don't find some scientist who will tell you exactly how many sand grains of sand. That misses the point. It's a proverbial saying, and it's just a proverb for you can't count it. Just going to be too big. That's all he's saying. That there's no way to count them. Verse 13, all these people, all what people? The examples he's given us so far. All these people still believing what God had promised them. I left out the word died, sorry. All these people died still believing what God had promised them. One of the points he's going to be making here is, did Abraham get Canaan? Well, kind of. Did Abraham have the promise? Well, yeah, he had the promised child. Depending on how you break it down, Genesis chapter 12, the first few verses there have 7 promises that God gave to Abraham when he called him. Did he realize all those? Like all the nations of the world will be blessed? No. There's a lot of that wasn't realized, but he knew it was going to happen. Started seeing some of the results, got some of it. A lot of it he never saw. Well, until after he died, and then I'm sure he looked down and saw the whole thing, right? But during his life he didn't see it. And that's the point he's making. These people died still believing what God had promised. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. Okay, this doesn't mean they didn't receive any of it. Yeah, some of it, but the full thing wasn't developed yet. You know why that's so important? Because we don't get the full deal yet. Are there blessings in being? Yes, there's blessings being a Christian. Yeah, it's the best life you can possibly live. Yeah, there's joy. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. But we're not scratching the surface. It's so much more. But you know what? We're not going to see it yet. But I hope that doesn't bother you. It didn't bother them. We know it. We know it because of the kind of God we have. Right? They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth. In other words, the real life is yet to come. Real life goes beyond this life. Obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. If they had longed for the country that they came from, they would have gone back. See, when Abraham says all these things, when Isaac says these things, he's not talking about Mesopotamia. He's talking about heaven. How do you know that? But remember Abraham at the end of his life? He said, listen, to his servant Eleazar, he said, when you go get a wife for my son, don't you dare let him go back to Mesopotamia. We left that place. We're not supposed to go back there. You can find a wife for him back there, but don't let my son go back there. He's supposed to stay here because this is where God called us to be, right? So he's not looking to go back to Mesopotamia. He's not looking for anything here on earth. He was looking beyond this life, and we're out of time. So we'll pick up here next week. We made it to verse 16, right?